Long before roads connected the world, villages made up the land. They sat scattered across valleys, hillsides, and river bends, separated by dense forest, open plain, and distances that most people would never cross in a lifetime. A person born in one village would grow old in that same village, raise children in that same village, and be buried in that same village without ever learning the name of the settlement 3 days' walk to the east. The world beyond was vast and mostly unknowable, and the people who lived in it did not try to know it. They had everything they needed where they were. They had the land, they had each other, and they had the deity. Every village kept one. They were not gods of the sky or the heavens. They were something older and closer than that. They lived in the ground, in the roots, in the stone. Each one was different. Some took the shape of great trees with bark that never aged. Others took the form of animals whose bones had turned to iron long before any living person could remember. They protected the village from what the wilderness carried in, and when human disagreement grew too large for human hands to settle, the deity served as the final judge. Its ruling was absolute. There was no appeal. But the deity did not speak to people directly. It could not be approached or bargained with nor asked for favors. It spoke through one voice only. Once every decade, a child was born into one of the guardian families with a mark across their forehead. In this village, the mark was a serpent, curved and unbroken, pressed into the skin like a scar. That child was taken from their family and given to the deity's service. They became the oracle. In return, the deity took everything from them: their sight, their hearing, their voice. The oracle lived in silence and darkness unless the deity chose to move through them, and when it did, the whole village stopped and listened. No oracle had ever lived past 20 years of age. They were honored above all others. They were mourned before they died. This is a story told by one such oracle in the final years of their life, when the deity returned their senses as thanks for their service and gave them one last task: to find the next child, to prepare them, and to pass on the only thing an oracle could truly leave behind. Not wisdom, not even comfort, but their memory. The memory of what they had witnessed, what the deity had judged, and what the village had been made to forget. These are those judgments. Welcome to the Portal Library. Step through and let the magic begin. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you'd love more stories or have a request. New videos uploaded every Friday. The Judgments of the Serpent, a fantasy short story. Chapter 1, The First Judgment. This was the first trial I ever witnessed. I was 7 years old. I could not see the faces of the people who gathered at the serpent's ground that morning. I could not hear the sound of their footsteps on the packed earth or the low murmur of their conversations as they arrived. I had lived without those things for as long as I could remember. But the serpent showed me everything in its own way. When the deity paid attention to something, I felt it. A pressure behind my eyes, a pull in my chest, a sudden awareness of a person or a place that I could not have known about on my own. The serpent did not give me sight. It gave me something closer to understanding. I knew where people stood. I knew when they moved. I knew, in a way I still cannot fully explain to you, what they carried inside them when they entered the clearing. I am telling you this so that you understand what is coming. What I describe to you will sound like I was there with open eyes and open ears. I was not. I was sitting at the base of the statue with my hands folded in my lap, and the serpent was doing the rest. Remember that, it will matter later. The trial began at dawn. The entire village came. That alone should tell you how serious this was. The serpent's ground was used for seasonal prayers and for the guardian family ceremonies. Trials rarely happened. Most disputes were handled by the elders in their own quarters, and most of those disputes were small. Land boundaries, water access, damaged property. The kinds of things that people who live closely together will always argue about. For a matter to reach the serpent, the elders had to agree unanimously that they could not resolve it. In the years I served, that happened 4 times. This was the first. They brought the boy in with 2 of the elders' men walking on either side of him. He was tall for his age, thin, and he walked with his shoulders dropped down. The serpent's attention settled on him the moment he entered the clearing. I felt the weight of it like a hand pressing down on my chest. The boy did not look at the statue. He looked at the ground directly in front of his feet, and he kept walking until the elders' men stopped him. The village spokesman, a man named Renath, stepped forward and addressed the serpent. He was the eldest of the council, and he had a voice that carried well. He spoke the formal words that opened a trial, asking for the serpent's attention and judgment, and then he presented the accusation. The boy, he said, had been found at the edge of the village as an infant. No one knew where he came from. No family in any neighboring settlement claimed him. The village took him in because that was their duty, and for the first few years, he was passed between families who agreed to house him for a season at a time. The family that kept him the longest was a couple named Doriah and Fen. They had no children of their own, and they took the boy in when he was 4. For 3 years, things were stable. Then Doriah fell ill with a sickness that none of the village healers could identify. She weakened over the course of 2 seasons and died. Fen followed within the year. The healers said his heart gave out. Renath paused after saying this. He let the silence sit for a moment before continuing. After Doriah and Fen died, Renath said, the misfortunes began to spread. A goat herd belonging to the family nearest to where the boy had lived lost 6 animals in a single season to illness. The well that served the eastern quarter of the village went dry for the first time in living memory. A child from one of the neighboring families broke her leg in a fall that should not have been severe enough to cause that kind of injury. Each of these events, taken alone, could be explained. Renath acknowledged that, but taken together, he said, and taken alongside the boy's arrival and the deaths that followed, the village had reached a conclusion. The boy carried something with him, a curse, a mark, something that had followed him from wherever he came from and had been slowly poisoning the ground around him since he arrived. The village had tried to manage the situation quietly. They had moved the boy to the outskirts after Doriah and Fen died. They had kept their children away from him. They had waited and watched and hoped that the misfortunes would stop. They had not stopped. Renath finished by stating the village's request. They asked the serpent to remove the boy from the village permanently. He did not say the word execution. He said removal. But everyone in the clearing understood what removal meant for a child with no family and no neighboring village willing to take him. The serpent listened to all of this. I felt its attention move across Renath's words the way water moves across stone, touching everything, absorbing what it needed. When Renath finished, the serpent stirred. This was the part that always frightened the villagers. When the deity moved through me, my body changed. My back straightened. My eyes opened, though I could not see through them the way other people did. My mouth opened, and a voice came out that was mine and was not mine at the same time. How old was the boy when Doriah took him in? The serpent asked through me. Renath answered, 4 years old. How old was Doriah when she fell ill? Renath hesitated. She had passed her 58th year. And Fen? 61. Were they in good health before the boy arrived? Renath straightened. They were well enough. That is not what I asked, the serpent said. The clearing went quiet. Renath looked at the ground for a moment, then answered. Doriah had a weakness in her lungs that had troubled her for several years. Fen had joint pain that kept him from working the fields some seasons, but they managed. The serpent did not respond to that. It moved on. Who cared for the boy after Doriah and Fen died? He was placed with the Sarath family for a short time, Renath said. When that arrangement did not work, he was moved to the eastern quarter and given a room in the storage building near the outer wall. How old was he when he was moved to the storage building? 8. He has lived there since. Yes. Alone. Renath paused again. Yes. The serpent released me. My body folded back into itself, and I sat in the dark again, feeling the residue of the deity's attention pulling away from Renath and moving outward toward the rest of the gathering. The first witness was a woman named Sira. She lived 3 houses from where Doriah and Fen had kept the boy, and she had been one of the first to raise concerns about him after their deaths. Sira spoke clearly and with certainty. She said the boy had always been quiet in a way that made people uneasy. He watched things. He stood at the edges of gatherings and stared. He rarely spoke to anyone, and when he did, his answers were short and strange. The serpent moved through me again. When did you last speak to the boy directly? It asked. Sira blinked. I have spoken to him several times over the years. When was the last time? Sira looked at Renath, then back at the statue. It would have been some time ago, perhaps 2 years. What did you speak about? I do not remember the exact words. Did you speak to him, or did you speak about him to someone else while he was present? Sira did not answer immediately. I may have been speaking to his guardian at the time. Doriath? Yes. So you spoke to Doriath about the boy while the boy was present? Yes. And the boy was 4 years old at the time. Sira pressed her lips together. I believe so. You have not spoken to him since. Sira said nothing for a moment. He is difficult to approach. The serpent moved on. The second witness was a man named Tobin, a farmer whose land bordered the eastern quarter. His goats were among the animals that had died. Tobin said the goats had been healthy before the boy was moved to the eastern quarter. Within 2 seasons of the boy's arrival, the first animals started dying. He had raised goats his entire life. He knew disease when he saw it, and this was something else. The animals stopped eating. They stood in the corners of the pen and refused to move. They wasted away. The serpent asked its questions. Where is the eastern quarter in relation to the river? Tobin frowned downstream. Has the river level changed in the last 4 years? It has been lower than usual, 2 dry seasons in a row. Lower water means the animals drank from shallower pools. Tobin shifted on his feet. I suppose so. Shallower pools carry more sediment and more risk of contamination. My goats were healthy before the boy came, Tobin said again. Your goats were healthy before 2 consecutive dry seasons reduced the water quality in the downstream quarter where they drank, the serpent said. Tobin's jaw tightened, but he did not argue with the deity. No one argued with the deity. The third witness was a woman named Asha, the mother of one of the children who had been involved in a fight with the boy. Her daughter, she said, had come home with a bruised face and a cut along her arm. The boy had hit her hard enough to knock her down and then hit her again when she tried to get up. The serpent asked when this happened. 3 months ago, Asha said. Where? Near the outer wall, near where the boy stays. What was your daughter doing near the outer wall? She was playing with the other children. How many other children were present? Asha hesitated, 4 or 5. Were they playing with the boy? No. Were they near the boy's quarters? They were in the area, yes. Had they gone there before? Asha's expression shifted. Children go everywhere. Had they gone to the boy's quarters before, specifically? I would not know what my daughter does at every moment of the day. Your daughter came home with a bruised face. Did you ask her what happened before the boy hit her? She told me the boy attacked her. Did you ask what preceded the attack? He attacked her, Asha repeated. That is what matters. What preceded the attack is exactly what matters, the serpent said. That is why we are here. Asha looked at the ground. I did not ask for details beyond what she told me. The serpent released me. I sat in the dark for a long time after that. The deity's attention was still moving through the crowd, touching each person in the clearing, reading things that the words had not carried. I could feel it working. The pressure behind my eyes grew heavier. The fourth witness was an older man named Kale. He had been on the Elder Council when the decision was made to take the boy in as an infant, and he had been involved in each of the placements that followed. Kale spoke more carefully than the others. He acknowledged that the boy had been moved frequently. He said the first family kept him for a year before requesting that he be placed elsewhere. The second family kept him for 6 months. He did not explain why those placements ended. He said only that the families found the arrangement difficult. What made the arrangement difficult? The serpent asked. Kale chose his words slowly. The boy was unsettled. He cried often as a small child. He did not attach easily to the people around him. A child passed between strangers did not attach easily. Kale looked at the statue. He seemed to understand that the serpent was not asking a question. What efforts were made to help the boy settle into each placement? The serpent asked. The families were given additional provisions for his care. Provisions for the families, what was given to the boy? Kale did not answer. Were the families instructed on how to care for a child who had been separated from his origins and moved repeatedly? We are a small village, Kale said quietly. We did what we could. You placed a child with a family that did not want him, and when that family gave him back, you placed him with another family that did not want him, And when they gave him back, you placed him with Doriah and Fen, who were elderly and unwell, because they were the only ones willing to take him. And when they died, you put him in a storage building by the outer wall and left him there for 6 years. He was 8 years old. Kale's hands were trembling. We did not know what else to do. You are here today asking me to remove him from the village. You brought a child here, failed to care for him, and now you want him gone because the consequences of that failure frighten you. The clearing was silent. I could feel every person in it through the serpent's awareness. Some of them were angry, some of them were frightened. A few of them, a very small number, were beginning to understand. The serpent released me, and the silence held. Then the boy was told to speak. He stood where he had been standing since the beginning, shoulders still sagging, eyes still on the ground. When Renath told him he could address the deity, he lifted his head for the first time. He did not speak for a long moment. The serpent waited. "I did not kill Doriah," the boy said. His voice was rough, as if he had not used it in a while. "I did not kill Fen. They were the only people who let me sleep inside their house without making me feel like I owed them something for it." He stopped and seemed to consider whether to continue. "I did hit Ashaz's daughter," he said. "She and the others came to the wall. They come every few weeks. They throw stones at the door or they bang on the walls at night. Sometimes they say things through the window. The last time they came, one of them spit on me. I hit her. I would do it again." Several of the villagers shifted. Someone murmured something. The boy ignored it. "The storage room leaks when it rains," he said. "The door does not close all the way. I eat what I can find or what the elders' men leave outside the door every few days. Sometimes they forget. I have been living like that since I was 8. Nobody in this village has looked me in the face in 3 years. You are all afraid of me, and I do not know why, because no one has ever told me what I did wrong." He stopped. His hands were clenched at his sides. "Doriah used to tell me that the serpent sees everything," he said quietly. "She said it knows what people carry inside them even when they hide it from each other. If that is true, then the serpent already knows I am not cursed. It knows I am just a boy that nobody wanted." He lowered his head again and said nothing more. The serpent's attention, which had been distributed across the entire clearing, pulled inward and gathered at a single point. I felt it concentrate in a way I had never felt before. The pressure behind my eyes became so heavy that I thought my head would split open. The deity moved through me one final time. When the serpent spoke, every person in the clearing went still. "This boy is not cursed," the serpent said. "There is no mark on him. There is no darkness following him. The illness that took Doriah was the same illness she had carried for years before this child ever entered your village. Fen's heart was weak long before this child was placed in their home. Your dry seasons are the result of weather and the shifting of the river, and your goats drank from fouled water because the drought pushed them downstream. These things happened. They were not caused by a child." The serpent paused. The clearing was so quiet that I became aware for the first time of the sound of wind moving through the grass beyond the edge of the gathering. The deity had opened my hearing. I could hear the wind. I could hear the breathing of the people nearest to me. I almost lost my concentration because it had been so long since I had heard anything at all. "This village failed this child," the serpent said. "You took him in and then you abandoned him by degrees. You let your fear grow unchecked and you fed it to your children and they carried it to his door. The adults in this village watched it happen and did nothing. Some of you are standing here today asking me to remove him, and you have convinced yourselves that this is justice. It is not." The serpent's voice changed. It grew quieter but heavier. "But I cannot undo what has been done to him, and I cannot undo what has been done to you. The fear is too deep. The damage is too far along. If I leave your memories intact, this boy will never be safe here, and you will never stop looking for reasons to blame him. So I will do what I must to protect everyone in this village, including him." The wind moved through the clearing again. I could hear it clearly now. I could hear everything. "I am taking from you the memory of these events. Every person in this clearing will forget the accusations, the fear, and the history that brought you here today. The boy will forget the years of isolation and mistreatment. You will forget that you were ever afraid of him. When you leave this ground, you will know him only as a child of the village, the same as any other." The serpent turned its attention to the guardian family seated near the base of the statue. I felt it settle on them with a specific weight. "The boy will be placed in the care of the Harith family. He will be raised among the guardians." He will be given what he should have been given from the beginning. Then the serpent did something it had never done before in any judgment I witnessed after this one. It gave the boy a name. "His name is Samson," the serpent said. "Use it." The light behind my eyes went white. The pressure released all at once, and for a brief moment. I felt the deity's power move outward from the statue in every direction, passing through every person in the clearing like wind through tall grass. Memories lifted. I felt them go. Conversations, glances, years of small cruelties and mounting fear, all of it pulled loose and carried away. When it was finished, the clearing was quiet. People stood in their places with a vagueness in their expressions, as if they had just woken from a midday sleep and could not remember why they were outside. The boy stood where he had been standing, but his shoulders had relaxed and the tension in his jaw had loosened. He looked around the clearing with a calm confusion, and when the eldest daughter of the Harath family walked over to him and touched his arm, he did not flinch. "Come on, Samson," she said. "Let us go home." He went with her. He did not look back. I sat at the base of the statue as the clearing emptied. My hearing faded. My sight, which had flickered for those few moments at the end, closed again. The serpent pulled its attention back into the stone and left me in the dark. I was the only one who remembered. That was the first time I understood what the serpent's protection cost. It took everything from them. The fear, yes. The cruelty, yes. But it also took the truth. Samson would grow up in the Harath household and he would never know what had been done to him. The village would go on and no one would learn from what had happened because no one would remember that it happened at all. The serpent protected the village. That was its purpose. Whether what it did that morning was mercy, I have spent a long time deciding. I am still deciding. I hope you are enjoying this story so far. What would you have done if you were the arbiter in that conflict? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chapter 2, The Second Judgment. The first trial taught me what the serpent could do. This one taught me what people could do to each other without ever raising a hand. I was 9 years old. The serpent had not spoken through me in nearly 2 years. I had begun to wonder whether the deity had finished with me, whether I had imagined the first trial entirely. I had no way to confirm it. I could not see. I could not hear. I sat at the base of the statue and felt the days pass through the changes in temperature on my skin, and I waited. When the second trial came, I felt the serpent wake before the villagers arrived. It was like a hand closing around my spine. The deity's attention moved outward from the stone and spread across the village, and I understood that something had been building for weeks that I had not been aware of. I am telling you this because the second trial was different from the first. The first time the village brought a stranger before the serpent, an outsider, a boy nobody wanted. That was painful, but it was simple. This time the serpent had to judge a family that the village had known for generations. A family that had eaten at every table, worked every harvest, attended every ceremony. Judging strangers is one thing, judging your own is something else entirely. The 4 siblings were the children of a couple named Vasek and Oda, who had been dead for nearly a decade by the time this trial took place. Vasek had been a builder. Oda had woven cloth. They were not wealthy, but they were respected, and they raised 4 children who the village expected would carry that respect forward. The eldest was Merk. He had taken over his father's trade and expanded it. He built walls and roofs and storage buildings for families across the village, and he had a reputation for doing solid work without overcharging. People trusted him. The second was Lesta. She was sharp in a way that made some people admire her and others keep their distance. She managed the family's shared land and handled their dealings with the village council. She spoke well in public, and she knew how to make people listen. The third was Pel. He was the quietest of the 4. He kept to himself, did seasonal work for different families, and mostly stayed out of the way. People described him as harmless, which is a word that sounds kind but often means invisible. The 4th was Oria, the youngest, the one the village liked best. Oria had a warmth that the other 3 lacked. People went to Oria when they needed someone to listen. Oria raised a child alone after her partner passed on and managed it without complaint. The child's name was Tavan. Oria was the one who died. Tavan brought the accusation. He was 16 years old and he walked into the serpent's ground with composure. He stood before the statue and spoke directly. His parent Oria had been found dead in their home 3 weeks earlier. The village healers determined that Oria had consumed a plant that grows along the riverbank. It is known in the village. It is lethal in the right amount. The elders ruled it a tragedy and offered their condolences and moved on. Tavan did not move on. He went to his parents' 3 siblings separately and asked each of them what they knew. Their answers did not match each other. Small things, dates that shifted. Details that changed depending on who was telling them. Tavan brought these discrepancies to the elders and demanded the matter reach the serpent. "One of them killed my parent," Tavan said. "I do not know which one, but they are lying and I want the serpent to find the truth." The 3 siblings stood together on the other side of the clearing. Merk in the center, Lesta to his left, Pell slightly behind them both. They looked hurt and confused, wounded that Tavan, a child they had known since birth, would accuse them of something this terrible. The serpent's attention moved across all 3 of them the moment Tavan finished speaking. I felt it pass through each one the way water passes through cloth, touching everything, absorbing what it found. Then the questioning began. Merk spoke first because he was the eldest and because no one challenged him when he stepped forward. He said Oria had been quieter in recent months. He attributed it to the change in seasons and to the difficulty of raising a child alone. Oria's partner had passed 2 years ago, and Oria had carried the household by themselves since then. Merk said he visited when he could. He brought food sometimes. He did what an older brother was supposed to do. The serpent moved through me. "How often did you visit?" it asked. "Every few weeks," Merk said. "When was the last time before Oria's death?" Merk shifted his weight, perhaps 5 or 6 weeks before. The serpent did not respond. It released me and moved on. Lesta spoke next. She was more polished than Merk. She acknowledged that her relationship with Oria had been complicated, as relationships between siblings sometimes are, but she said there was no serious conflict between them. They disagreed on things. Oria was gentle in a way that Lesta found impractical, but that was Oria's nature, and Lesta had long ago accepted it. "What did you disagree about?" the serpent asked. "Small things," Lesta said. "How to manage the family's shared land, how to handle responsibilities, the kinds of things any family argues about." "Were these disagreements recent?" "They were ongoing. They were not serious enough to warrant this." She gestured at the clearing, at the gathered village, at Tavan standing across from her. Pell spoke last. He said less than either of the others. He said that he and Oria had been close as children but had drifted apart as adults. He had his own life and his own concerns. He did not see Oria often. He was sorry about that. He had not known Oria was suffering. "You didn't know," the serpent said. "No," Pell said. "When did you last speak to Oria?" "I don't remember exactly. Several months ago." The serpent let the silence hold for a long time after that. I could feel it working. The deity was not satisfied with anything it had heard so far. It called the witnesses. The first was a woman named Dana who lived 2 houses from Oria. She had known Oria for most of their adult lives, and she spoke with careful hesitation. Dana said Oria had changed over the past year. There was no single moment she could point to. It was gradual. Oria used to come to the well in the mornings and talk to whoever was there. That stopped. Oria used to attend the seasonal gatherings and bring something for the shared table. That also stopped. Oria used to call across the fence in the evenings when Dana was outside. That stopped too. Dana said she asked Oria once if something was wrong. Oria said everything was fine. Dana noticed that Oria had lost weight. She noticed that Tavan had taken over most of the household work, things a 16-year-old should not have been managing alone. She noticed these things, and she did not press further because it seemed like a family matter, and she did not want to intrude. The serpent asked, "Did any of Oria's siblings visit during this period?" Dana said Lesta came once, about 4 months before Oria's death. Dana heard raised voices from inside the house. She could not make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. When Lesta left, her expression was hard, and she did not greet Dana on her way past. Oria did not come outside for 2 days after that visit. The second witness was a man named Ferric who worked alongside Merk on building projects. Ferric was straightforward. He did not seem to understand entirely why his testimony mattered, but he answered the serpent's questions without hesitation. Ferric mentioned that Merk and Oria had disagreed about a piece of family land for years. The land had belonged to Vasek and Oda. After their deaths, the understanding among the siblings was that the plot nearest the river would go to Oria. Merk had taken control of it instead. He said it made practical sense because he was already using part of the land for material storage, and Oria had no immediate plans for it. Ferric said the village knew about the disagreement. It was not a secret. Oria had raised the matter with the elders once years ago, and the elders had sided with Merc because Merc was already working the land and the arrangement was functioning. Did Oria push further after that? The serpent asked. No, Ferric said. Oria let it go. Ferric added, without being asked, that Merc had once said to him that Oria would never have managed the land properly anyway. Merc had said it lightly. Ferric had not thought much of it at the time. The third witness was an older woman named Hesta. She had been a friend of the siblings' mother, Oda, and she had watched all 4 children grow up. She carried herself with authority. Hesta said that before Oria's partnership, Lesta had courted the same person. Lesta made her interest known first. The person chose Oria instead. Hesta said Lesta never spoke about it publicly, and if anyone asked, Lesta dismissed it as something that happened years ago and no longer mattered. But Hesta had watched Lesta carefully after that, because she had watched Oda deal with a similar wound in her own youth, and she knew what it looked like when someone swallowed that kind of rejection and let it sit. She said Lesta's demeanor toward Oria changed. The warmth went out the window. Hesta noticed the small things, comments Lesta made about Oria in front of others that sounded like concern but carried an edge. A way of praising Oria that was always underhanded. A habit of bringing up Oria's failures in conversation as though she were being helpful. Oria absorbed all of it without fighting back. Hesta said she believed Oria didn't fight back because Oria loved Lesta and assumed Lesta's intentions were good. The fourth witness was a young man named Ren, who had worked with Pell on seasonal jobs. Ren said that Pell had borrowed a significant amount from Oria about 2 years ago. Oria had given the money without conditions. When Oria mentioned it once in passing, Pell told Ren and several others that Oria was petty and difficult to deal with, that Oria kept score of every favor and held it over people. The story spread among the people Pell spent time with, and Oria's reputation in that circle shifted. Ren said Oria stopped coming to the gatherings that Pell attended. Ren had assumed it was by choice. It had not occurred to him until now that Oria might have been pushed out. The serpent released me after the fourth witness, and the clearing was quiet. The 3 siblings were still standing together, but the space between them had grown. Merc's hands were at his sides and his fingers were moving. Lesta had not moved at all. Pell was looking at the ground. The serpent called Tavan back. Tavan described the last months of his parents' life. Oria stopped eating full meals. She would push food around and then set the plate aside. She stopped sleeping through the night. Tavan would hear movement in the house at odd hours and find Oria sitting by the window, looking at nothing. Oria would smile when Tavan asked if everything was all right, and the smile was convincing enough that Tavan wanted to believe it. Tavan said there was a night, about 2 months before Oria died, when Oria told him something that he had not understood at the time. They were sitting outside after the evening meal and Oria said, "I think I have been too much trouble for everyone for too long." Tavan told Oria that wasn't true. Oria touched the side of Tavan's face and said, "You are the only good thing I have done." Then Oria changed the subject and they didn't speak about it again. Tavan said there was one more visit from a sibling before the end. He did not see which one. He was outside the house when they arrived, and by the time he came back, the visitor was leaving through the back path. Oria was sitting at the table with an expression that Tavan had never seen before. Oria did not speak for the rest of that day. Tavan brought food. Oria did not eat. Tavan sat with Oria until late into the night, and at some point Oria fell asleep at the table, and Tavan put a blanket over Oria's shoulders and went to bed. 3 days later, Oria was dead. Tavan found the body in the morning. He did not describe what that looked like. He did not need to. The clearing had gone very still. I could feel the serpent's attention pressing inward, tightening around the 3 siblings. The deity had heard enough from the village. Now it wanted the truth. The serpent moved through me one more time, and this time the pressure was worse than anything I had felt before. It was not just the deity's voice using my mouth. It was the deity's will moving through the entire clearing, pressing against the 3 siblings with a force that I could feel even from where I sat. The air around them changed. The space they occupied became smaller, heavier, and harder to breathe in. The serpent addressed Merc first. "Tell me about the plant," it said. Merc opened his mouth to speak and nothing came out. He tried again. His rehearsed answer, whatever it was, would not form. His jaw worked. His eyes widened. And then the truth came out because there was nothing else left. Merk said he visited Oria 6 weeks before the death and saw the condition Oria was in. The house was barely maintained. Oria was thin and slow and had a flatness behind the eyes that Merk recognized because he had seen it in his mother before she died. He did not offer to help. He left food at the door and walked away. 3 weeks before the death, he came back. He brought the plant. He did not put it in Oria's hands. He did not say what it was for. He left it on the table near the stove where Oria kept cooking supplies. The plant was identifiable. Anyone in the village who had lived near the river would know what it was and what it could do. Why? The serpent asked. Merk's hands were shaking. I told myself Oria might use it for something else. You told yourself that? Yes. And did you believe it? Merk closed his eyes. His voice came out broken. No. The serpent turned to Lesta. Tell me about the last visit, it said. Lesta's composure, which had held through every witness, through every implication, cracked. She tried to speak and the same thing happened. The prepared answer dissolved. What replaced it was raw and uneven. Lesta said she visited Oria and they argued. The argument started small and grew until it wasn't about anything specific anymore. It was about everything. The land, the partnership, the years of Lesta feeling like Oria was given things Lesta deserved. In the middle of it, Lesta said something she had been carrying for years. She said that Oria had always been the weakest of the four of them, that their parents had worried about Oria the most, that the partner who passed had told Lesta, specifically, that living with Oria had become unbearable. The serpent asked, was that last part true? Lesta stared at the ground. I don't know, it might have been. I said it because I knew it would hurt. You said it to a person who was already broken. I didn't know how broken, Lesta said. You knew enough, the serpent said. The serpent turned to Pell. Pell had not looked up since the questioning began. His shoulders were drawn in and his breathing was shallow. The serpent did not need to press hard. Pell was already coming apart on his own. Pell said he saw Oria the day before her death. He came to the house because he had heard from someone in the village that Oria was unwell. When he arrived, Oria was calm, steady. Clear-eyed in a way that Pell said frightened him, because it looked like the opposite of what he had expected. Oria told him that things would be easier for everyone soon. Oria said it gently. Pell understood what it meant. He stood in Oria's home and he understood and he said nothing. He did not ask Oria to reconsider. He did not walk to the nearest neighbor for help. He did not find Tavan and tell the boy what his parent had said. Why? The serpent asked. Pell's voice was barely audible, because part of me was relieved. The word landed in the clearing like a stone dropped into still water. I felt it ripple through every person present. Pell's shoulders folded inward and he covered his face with both hands. I owed Oria money I was never going to repay, Pell said through his hands. And every time I saw Oria, I remembered what I had done and what kind of person that made me. I thought if Oria was gone, I could stop remembering. The clearing was silent. Tavan was standing with his arms at his sides and his face had gone entirely blank. I could feel through the serpent's awareness that the boy was holding himself together by a thread so thin it was almost invisible. He had come to this trial believing one of his parents' siblings had committed murder. What he had just learned was worse. All three of them had helped kill Oria. They did it slowly over years, and the last of them watched it coming and stepped out of the way. The serpent gathered itself. The pressure in the clearing shifted. Every person present felt it. The deity was about to rule. Oria was not killed by a single hand, the serpent said. Oria was killed by 3 people who should have been the first to offer protection and were instead the source of the wound. The land was taken and the protest was silenced. The spirit was worn down through years of careful diminishment. The money was stolen and the debt was twisted into blame. And when the weight of all of it became too much to carry, one of you provided the means, another provided the final blow, and the third stood by and let it happen. The serpent paused. The wind moved through the clearing. My hearing was fully open now, and I could hear the breath of every person standing in the space. All 3 of you are guilty. The nature of your guilt is different, but the weight is shared. None of you acted alone. None of you can claim ignorance. Together, you created the conditions that took Oria from this village and from this child. The serpent's voice changed. It deepened and slowed, and I felt the deity's power begin to move outward from the statue the way it had during the first trial, but differently. The first time, the power had passed through the crowd like wind and lifted memories away. This time, it moved with direction. It moved toward the three siblings, and it carried something with it. "I am placing Oria's suffering into each of you," the serpent said. "The loneliness, the rejection, the years of being diminished by the people who should have stood closest, the despair of the final days. You will carry this. You will feel what Oria felt. You will understand in your own bodies what your actions and your silence cost." The power reached them. The weight of Oria's pain entered all three of them at once. Merk staggered forward and dropped to one knee. Lesta's hands flew to her chest, and she made a sound that was halfway between a gasp and a cry. Pell collapsed entirely, folding to the ground with his arms wrapped around himself. The village watched. Nobody moved. "Each of you will be placed under the guardianship of two families," the serpent continued. "The Harith family and the Torin family will oversee Merk. The Voss family and the Emin family will oversee Lesta. The Drath family and the Kelam family will oversee Pell. Your guardians will observe your conduct. They will watch how you treat this village, how you treat each other, and how you treat Tavan. They will determine when you have shown genuine remorse and genuine change." The serpent turned its attention to Tavan. I felt the deity's awareness settle on the boy. "The burden I have placed on them will be lifted when you choose to forgive them," the serpent said. "No one can make that choice for you. No one can rush it. You will come before me when you are ready, and if you grant forgiveness, I will lift what I have placed on them and give them a measure of peace. If you are never ready, the burden remains." Tavan did not respond. His face had not changed. He stood in the clearing and looked at the three people kneeling on the ground in front of him, and whatever he was feeling, he kept it behind that blank expression like a wall he had built in the last few minutes and did not intend to take down any time soon. "The village will remember everything that was spoken here today," the serpent said. "Nothing will be erased. Nothing will be hidden. You will all carry the knowledge of what happened to Oria and why." The serpent released me. The pressure withdrew from the clearing, and the deity's attention folded back into the stone. My hearing faded. My sight, which had flickered at the edges for a few moments during the ruling, went dark again. I sat at the base of the statue and felt the clearing empty slowly as the villagers left in silence. The three siblings were helped to their feet by their newly assigned guardians. They moved slowly, unsteadily, like people learning to walk. The village parted around them and watched them go. Tavan was the last to leave. I could not see him, but I felt his presence through the fading edge of the serpent's awareness. He stood in the clearing for a long time after everyone else had gone. I do not know what he was thinking. I do not know if he was grieving for his parent, or processing what he had learned, or already beginning to decide whether forgiveness was something he could ever offer. I know that he left eventually, because at some point I was alone at the base of the statue, and the clearing was empty, and the wind was the only thing moving. I spent a long time thinking about which approach was more just. The first time, nobody had to face what they had done. This time, everyone did. The first time, the victim lost the memory of their suffering. This time, the victim's suffering was the instrument of the punishment. I do not know which one was right. I am not sure the serpent knew either. I think it did what it could with the tools it had, and the tools were never designed for problems this complicated. What I do know is that Tavan came back to the serpent's ground. But that part of the story is not mine to tell. When the time comes, you will be the one sitting where I am sitting now. You will feel the serpent's attention move through you, and you will learn what Tavan decided. I hope you are ready for it. I was not ready for any of this, but that is what it means to serve. Epilogue: The Last Years. I have told you the heavy things. Let me tell you about some of the happiest days of my life. The day my senses came back, I was sitting at the base of the statue the way I always sat, with my hands folded in my lap and my back against the stone. It was early morning. I knew that because the stone was still cool from the night and the sun had not yet warmed it. That was how I measured time for most of my life. Temperature, the weight of the air, the way the ground felt beneath me when it rained versus when it was dry. Sound came first, a rushing in my ears that I thought was the serpent stirring because that was the only thing I had ever associated with sensation returning. But it didn't stop. It kept building, and then it separated into layers, whined through grass, a bird somewhere above me, footsteps on packed earth far away moving in different directions. Someone was talking. I could hear actual words spoken by an actual person, and they were saying something about a goat that had gotten loose. I sat very still, and listened to a man complain about a goat for what must have been 2 full minutes, and it was one of the finest things I have ever experienced. Then my eyes opened, and there was light everywhere. I had seen through the serpent's awareness before. During the trials, the deity had given me flickers of sight, brief and overwhelming. This was different. This was mine. The light was warm and golden, and it came from above the tree line to the east, and I could see the dust moving through it in slow spirals, and I could see the bark of the tree nearest to me, and I could see my own hands in my lap. I turned them over and looked at the lines on my palms. I sat there staring at my own hands for so long that one of the guardian family members came to check on me and found me crying. I was 15 years old. I had never seen my own face. I had never heard my own voice outside of the serpent's channeling. I had never tasted food with full awareness of what I was putting in my mouth. The guardian woman who found me, Essa of the Harath family, knelt beside me and asked if I was all right, and when I answered her, it was the first time I had ever spoken my own words to another person. I said, "Is it always this loud?" She laughed, I heard her laugh, and I memorized it immediately without meaning to. It was the first laugh I ever heard, and I can still recall exactly how it sounded. Essa brought me to the village. I had lived in the village my entire life, but I had never truly seen it. She walked slowly because I kept stopping. Everything required my full attention, the color of the thatch on the rooftops. The way smoke rose from a chimney and dissolved into the air. A dog sleeping in a doorway. Children chasing each other around a cart. An old man sitting on a bench with his eyes closed, his face turned toward the sun. I watched the old man for a long time. I understood him completely. The market was where Essa was taking me, and when we arrived, I nearly sat down in the middle of the path because the smell hit me all at once. Roasted grain, smoked fish, fresh bread, overripe fruit, animal hide, dirt, sweat. Someone was burning herbs near one of the stalls, and the smoke curled through everything else and tied it together. I stood in the middle of it and breathed. Essa bought me a piece of bread with honey on it. I bit into it, and the sweetness was so immediate and so complete that I stopped chewing and just held it in my mouth. Essa watched me and her eyes went soft, and she put her hand on the back of my head the way I have since learned that mothers do, and she said, "Take your time." I ate the entire piece very slowly, then I asked for another one. Essa laughed again and bought it for me. That was the first day. The days after that came fast. I wanted to do everything and see everything and hear everything, and the village did not know what to make of me. For 10 years I had been the oracle. Silent, still, seated at the base of the statue. The villagers brought offerings and spoke prayers in my direction and treated me with a kind of distant reverence that required nothing from me except that I exist. Now I was walking through their market, touching the fabric on their stalls. Now I was sitting at the edge of the well listening to women argue about whose turn it was to draw water. Now I was standing behind the baker's building with my eyes closed, breathing in the smell of bread the way other people breathed in air. Some of the villagers were cautious. They bowed when I came near and stepped aside and watched me from the corners of their eyes. Others adjusted quickly. A boy my age asked me if I wanted to see the river, and I said yes, and we ran there together, and I put my feet in the water, and the cold was so sharp that I yelped, and the boy laughed, and I laughed. I did not have a name. Oracles are not given names, but the boy at the river called me Little Serpent. Other children picked it up, and soon the whole village used it. You were born 3 days after my senses returned. The Harath family brought you to the serpent's ground when you were a week old, wrapped in cloth, with the mark already dark across your forehead. I sat beside Essa and looked at you and touched the edge of the cloth near your face. You were small and serious. Your eyes were open and you looked at me without blinking, and I remember thinking that you already had the look of someone who was paying attention to more than what was in front of them. I touched my own forehead, where the same mark sat, and then I touched yours very gently, and you grabbed my finger and held it. I felt recognition. I knew what your life would be. I knew the silence and the darkness you would enter, and I knew that my job was to give you everything I could before the door closed. You grew quickly. At 2, you followed me everywhere, and I let you, even when I wanted to be alone, because I understood that the bond between us needed to be built. At 3, you started speaking, and your first full sentence was addressed to me. You said, "Little Serpent, I am hungry." I took you to the market and bought you bread with honey, and you ate it the same way I had eaten mine on the first day, slowly, with your eyes wide. At 4, you started asking questions I could not answer. You asked me what the serpent dreamed about. You asked me if the mark on our foreheads hurt. You asked me where I would go when I died. At 5, you sat still for the first time. We were at the base of the statue in the evening and the sun was going down and you were sitting in my lap, and I told you about the serpent. I told you what it felt like when the deity moved through me. I told you about the pressure and the loss of control and the strange, overwhelming awareness that came with it. You listened without interrupting, which was unusual for you, and when I finished you said, "Will it hurt?" I told you the truth. I said yes sometimes. But I told you that the serpent would also show you things no one else in the village would ever see, and that there was something valuable in that, even when it was heavy. You thought about this for a while, then you said, "I am glad you are the one telling me." I held on to that. The years between 15 and 20 were the fullest years of my life. I learned to swim in the river. I learned the names of the trees by the sound their leaves made in the wind. I spent an entire afternoon sitting in the rain because I wanted to know what rain felt like when I could actually hear it hitting the ground around me. A woman named Breen taught me to cook, and I was terrible at it, but she was patient, and I ate everything I made because it was mine, and I had made it with my own hands. I sat on rooftops at night and listened to the insects. I learned that the village sounded different after dark, quieter in some ways and louder in others, as though the daytime noise was just a cover for the real conversation happening. I had a favorite spot on the roof of the storage building near the eastern wall, and I would sit there until the cold forced me inside, counting the sounds I could identify and trying to hear new ones. You were with me for most of it. You and I had a routine. Mornings were for the market and for whatever Essa had planned for us. Afternoons were for the serpent's ground, where I told you the stories. Evenings were ours. I told you the 2 judgments over the course of several months. I told them slowly because you were young and because the material was heavy and because I wanted you to absorb it rather than just hear it. You asked questions after every session. Some of them surprised me. I started noticing the changes when I was 19. A tiredness that sleep did not fix. A weight in my chest that came and went at first and then came and stayed. My hearing flickered one afternoon at the market. The sound cut out for 3 or 4 seconds and then returned, and I stood very still in the middle of the crowd and waited to see if it would happen again. It did not happen again that day. It happened again a week later, then 2 days after that. I did not tell you. I told Essa. She sat with me for a long time and did not speak, and then she said she would make sure the Harath family was ready for you when the time came. I thanked her. She put her hand on the back of my head the way she had on the first day, and she held it there. I always reminisce about one day in particular. It was late in the dry season, and the market was loud and crowded, and the air smelled like everything at once. I had taken you there because you wanted to see the cloth merchant who sometimes let children touch the dyed fabrics, and you spent a long time running your fingers across a piece of deep blue cloth and telling me it felt like water. I bought us both bread. We sat on the low wall near the south entrance and ate and watched the people move through the stalls. You pointed at a man carrying a basket of fish on his head and asked me how he kept it balanced. Your laugh sounded like Essa's. I don't know if you know that. It had the same shape, the same way it started low and climbed. We sat on that wall for a long time. The sun moved across the sky and the shadows shifted and the market thinned out as the afternoon grew hot. You leaned against my arm and closed your eyes, and I sat there with you and listened to the village and felt the sun on my face and did not think about anything at all. That was a good day. I want you to know that. Of all the days I was given, and I was given more than any oracle before me, that one for some reason was memorable. I have told you what I can. The serpent will show you the rest. It will take your senses, but it will give you something else in return, and you will be frightened, and that is all right. You will sit in the dark for a long time, and you will think you are alone, but you are not. The serpent is always there. It is listening even when you cannot hear it. One day your senses will come back. When they do, go to the market first, buy the bread with honey, eat it slowly, trust me on that. And find the child with the mark. They will need you the way you needed me. Give them everything you can. Tell them the stories, take them to the river, sit with them on the wall and watch the people and laugh. That is what we leave behind. That is what the serpent cannot give and cannot take away. I am glad I was the one who got to tell you. Quote of the week: "We are responsible not only for what we do, but also for what we do not do." Molière. Thank you for listening to the judgments of the serpent. Hope you enjoyed this story. If you want to hear more, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. New stories are uploaded every Friday.